Point 1. Our tendency to be willfully blind. How could I have been so blind? That's the expression that comes to mind when we realize our current dilemma is something we could have prevented if only we'd paid attention to all the signs and warnings staring us in the face all along. We often find ourselves in such a situation because we are hardwired to see only what we want. And as humans, the only things we want to see are the things that make us feel good about ourselves, which confirm our biases. If there is anything that has a different effect, our mind will simply choose not to notice it, no matter how obvious it is. According to Margaret Heffernan, this cognitive phenomenon is known as willful blindness. Being willfully blind means you could have known about something but chose not to see it. Individually or collectively, willful blindness is a human phenomenon to which we all yield in minor and significant matters. We can't absorb and comprehend everything we encounter. The cognitive constraints of our brains simply won't allow us to. This point implies that we must screen what we absorb. Therefore, what we opt to admit and exclude is crucial. We largely accept the information that boosts our self-esteem while selectively filtering out whatever challenges our delicate egos and core beliefs the most. In this summary, we will examine how willful blindness is perilous for us and the people around us. And most importantly, you will discover how you can achieve real power and unleash your capacity for change by learning to confront facts and fears. Key point 2. Liking people like ourselves narrows our perspective. As humans, we tend to fall in love with people we have a lot in common with. Yes, the general belief is that opposites attract, but when it comes to marriage and most other aspects of our lives, this law doesn't apply. We often fail to notice the glaring similarities between us and the people we marry and live with because we all want to believe that our choices stem from a wide and diverse range of preferences. However, we subconsciously gravitate toward the familiar and remain blind to the different. Familiarity, it turns out, does not breed contempt. It breeds comfort. Margaret Heffernan. We don't scan a vast horizon regarding love and association. We merely go with people who look a lot like ourselves and share the same values as we do. This phenomenon is what sociologists and psychologists, who have spent decades conducting studies on human behaviors, call positive assortative mating. Willful blindness thrives on a series of decisions that restrict our view. We go through life actively seeking suitable matches, and it feels good when we find one. That is why we like people similar to us, or that we imagine might have some attributes in common because they feel familiar and safe. This sense of familiarity makes us like ourselves more. And as our sense of belonging increases, our self-esteem rises, and we start to feel happy. This cognitive pattern applies equally to significant decisions, such as choosing a life partner, a career, a place to live, forming friendships, and seemingly trivial choices like our musical preferences. Nonetheless, the drawback of finding contentment in the familiar is that it leads to the rejection of many alternatives along the way. It narrows our range of interests, restricting the variety of music, books, or individuals that could expand our horizons. Key point 3. What led us to a counterproductive work culture? We live in an age where overwork is highly celebrated and accepted as the norm. Employers in tech, finance, oil and gas, medical, engineering, and media all over the world push their employees to work overtime to increase productivity. The truth is that overwork does nothing but stifle creativity and significantly reduce productivity. It is a long-established fact that overwork results in fatigue and burnout. Yet we still ignore it and try to spend the biggest chunk of our day working. Even rested and alert, you may not be able to see what's right in front of you. Margaret Heffernan. The human mind has limits. There is a level of mental activity and stress our minds can handle before succumbing to fatigue. For example, when we are tired, our brains slow down, and we find it very difficult to see the obvious or maintain our efficiency level. Then there is the sleep factor. Today's work cultures glorify sleeplessness. Studies have proven that missing just one night's sleep greatly impacts the brain's ability to function. After 24 hours of sleep deprivation, there is an overall 6% drop in the level of glucose reaching the brain. Unfortunately, the parts of our brains that feel the strongest effect of this drastic drop are the parietal lobe and the prefrontal cortex, the parts of our brains that help us reason and make good judgments. Fatigue and lack of sleep narrow your vision and reduce your effectiveness. In essence, when we don't sleep or work too hard, we find it difficult to see a problem. We don't notice that we are losing our capacity to reason clearly, make logical decisions, and see consequences and complexity. Key point 4. Trying to get rich blurs our vision. Money is a powerful source of motivation for us as humans. Most things we do in life have one core purpose: to make us richer. In fact, studies have shown that we tend to adapt the degree of effort we expend according to the magnitude of the reward we expect. We pursue wealth for a fairly compelling reason. It enhances our well-being and serves as a driving force. That's why companies pay overtime and bonuses. But this often causes us to lose sight of what's right and wrong. The truth is, the busier we become trying to get rich, the less likely we are to see clearly and work thoughtfully. Money keeps us exceptionally occupied, often to the point where we overlook the obvious and make irrational decisions. A love of money can push your inclination to be willfully blind. When our love of money meets our tendency to be willfully blind, we act in ways incompatible with what we stand for. Moreover, the more we care about money, the less we care about people. Money motivates only our interest in ourselves, making us self-centered. When we make money our primary source of motivation, we inadvertently damage our relationships. The farther we let money separate us from the important people in our lives, the easier it becomes for us to treat people as things. In effect, we turn a blind eye to the human cost of toxic cultures and immoral decisions. Did you know? In a 2009 study, a team of Chinese and American researchers put volunteers through a rigorous exercise that left them feeling upset. However, in their distressed state, they were asked to count money, which noticeably improved their mood. Key point 5. The key to seeing better. So far, we've established that when we exhibit willful blindness, it occurs in the presence of information we should be aware of, but choose to remain ignorant of because it provides emotional comfort. We are all naturally biased, and we can't help it. Willful blindness is something that is ingrained in the very core of our being as humans. It's become part of us to the point where we ignore things that challenge our beliefs without even realizing it. Fortunately, even though willful blindness is widespread, it doesn't mean it's inevitable. Now that we know how willful blindness works, we can develop new habits to help us mitigate the conditions in which willful blindness flourishes. So, while we can't eliminate willful blindness, we can always maintain a sense of awareness that will make it easier for us to notice those blind spots and pay attention to them. Put more effort into reaching out to those you consider different and try to see the positive traits in them. We can start by recognizing and seeing through our bubbles, our friends, institutions, family, and extended social circle. Once we gain a clear perspective on how much we've surrounded ourselves with like-minded individuals, we can consciously reach out to those who don't conform and appreciate their positive qualities. When we scrutinize our major institutions today, from Congress to corporate boards and churches, we quickly realize that the lack of diversity presents a significant challenge. The sooner these institutions embrace diversity, the sooner they can free themselves from the self-inflicted blindness that leaves them vulnerable and disconnected. Key point 6. Current corporate culture needs to be overturned. To start seeing clearly, we also have to understand that our cognitive capacity is limited and that there is a huge cost for working long hours without rest. Taking on heroic hours is not proof of commitment to an employer, it's simply disastrous. So, it's time we move away from our current culture that rewards long working hours. The best way to assess contribution is by output, not working hours. For instance, businesses evaluating performance by the number of hours worked might consider a more progressive and empathetic method. They could assess employee contributions based on their results and commend those focusing on sustaining a balanced relationship between their professional and personal lives. Increase productivity by getting enough rest and focusing on one task at a time. Pulling all-nighters and multitasking is horribly counterproductive. The sooner we acknowledge that extended hours and multitasking yield nothing but ineffectiveness and negligence, the better. No amount of brain training can expand our cognitive limitations. Many employers believe they can somehow enhance their employees' cognitive capacities by solving puzzles or using programs like Brain Trainer. They may believe that these methods can increase their capacity. Unfortunately for them, only aerobic exercises have been scientifically proven to impact the brain positively. Therefore, if safeguarding and enhancing your mental understanding, or that of your team, is your goal, the best approach is to engage in aerobic exercise at the gym or simply head home for well-deserved rest. In fact, the next time you hear executives proudly recounting their all-nighters or conducting conference calls from their cars, offer your sympathies because they are harming themselves more than they realize. Conclusion. We are all naturally biased and have an innate tendency to always act in favor of ourselves. As it turns out, this inclination to be biased is because our brains have evolved into calling only the things we want to see to our attention. That's how we can explain our tendency to embrace information that boosts our self-esteem while selectively filtering out anything that challenges our delicate egos and fundamental beliefs. Hence, our preference for the familiar, our love for the people with which we surround ourselves, and our tendency to overwork, reject change, and be fascinated with money all have ways of making us feel good about ourselves, but with serious consequences. They all make us ignorant and blind to the obvious. However, it's worth noting that willful blindness isn't always detrimental. It can prove remarkably useful, particularly in preserving our social relationships. For example, we may overlook a colleague's tie stain, a partner's blemishes, or a neighbor's untidiness. Willful blindness might seem like the easier path at first, but the same mechanisms that blind us to the world also put us in danger. As long as we allow these dangers to go unacknowledged, they grow in strength and potential harm. So, we must eliminate willful blindness by mitigating the conditions in which it thrives. We must continually maintain a sense of awareness and develop new habits that can help us get around this natural tendency to be biased. However, when we are determined to see, we give ourselves hope and achieve real power. Try this. To stop being blind to the obvious, ask yourself simple questions. What could or should I know that I'm currently unaware of? What am I overlooking in this situation? Never let your desire for financial gains hinder you from seeing clearly and working thoughtfully. Always consider other people's interests, and don't ever put your relationships at risk because of money. Finally, get enough rest and do aerobic exercise regularly to protect and nourish your intellectual capacity.